Hi and welcome. Today I'm going to change course in uh, in the trend that I used to teach some aspects about the green architecture and sustainability and design and site planning. I want to do something more interesting today, probably for most of you, which is basically how to draw perspective. I know that most of the my channel visitors are probably ambitious architects or designers or students of architecture or people who have some artistic talent that they want to express somehow. In architecture, it's a little bit more complicated than that because there is the cultural component and the visionary aspect of architecture, because we shape the form aspects of society, the physical and formal aspects of society, and we answer beyond the functions. We answer to the eternal aesthetic question. In this short video, I would like to teach you how to draw perspective. And some of you might ask, why do I need to know how to draw a perspective? You see, most of architecture is realistic objects. They're not abstract. So when you think in terms of 2D, you kind of deceive yourself into believing that this is how the architecture would look, two-dimensional X and Y. In fact, nothing around you shows itself or expresses itself in 2D. I mean, the ancient Egyptians used to draw the shoulder in a twisted form, but in an elevation form. And if you go back to the Egyptian drawings and color drawings in the pyramids, for example, you'd see that their representation of the human body is not in perspective. It was two-dimensional, but it was a tricky two-dimensional because it shows the legs walking, for example, but the shoulder is in front elevation. Now, and nowadays, we surpass that. We express that as a form of abstraction, if some of the artists ever do that. But for architects, in order to capture your vision, the first thing is to express it in realism. Otherwise, you'd always be surprised. Oh, my elevation looked much nicer when I did it. What happened? What happened is that you didn't imagine your elevation in perspective meeting with the other elevation. So my best advice for young architects and young designers is to go ahead and learn perspective and sketch, because this is the way you can express yourself and you can understand and visualize the building in 3D. And this is what this lesson is all about. I'm going to teach you very, very simple. Don't get surprised or upset or disappointed that it's not as mature, because there are many classes out there that teaches you that. But I'm going to tell you my way of doing things, which is very simple, and it's a two-point perspective. So let's go to my iPad screen and I will explain that there. Okay, so here is my iPad screen, and it's a white canvas at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch a very simple perspective in which I'll teach you to do the perspective intuitively, so without really going into technical aspects of following the vanishing point. So the first thing that we need to do is to draw the horizon. And this is the line where, for example, the sky would meet the ocean. Ocean. And this is what we used to see in any photograph or landscape. Usually the sky meets the earth in a relatively flat line. Now, when you zoom out, it ends up as a curve, but this is not the case in our lesson here. So the first thing we need to do is to draw a line of the cube which is closer to us, and then we draw the surface that is far from us. And if we assume that the building is a little bit on the rectangle side, so we draw the other line that represent the other edge. Now, some people ask me, why do you put these lines here in particular? Why don't you put them up here, for example? And the reason is because when you are on the ground looking at the horizon, your eyes is always cutting through the horizon. When you look at a building, for example, you always see your eye will be somewhere around 5 feet of the height of the building. That means your eye falls within the mass of the building and the building is not up here floating in the air, and probably you would see its the bottom of its floor. That's not the case. That's not how we perceive architecture, unless we are talking about a building that has some sort of columns and then you're standing underneath looking upward. Now, we go back to our perspective and we can define 2 points on the horizon that would represents our vanishing points. As you know, or as you can learn this from any YouTube video or any course, this is how it goes. You have 2 points. I sometimes draw perspectives at 3 points, meaning the 3-dimension vanishing points. But for all practicality reason, we need to focus on the 2 dimensions. So what we do here is we follow these lines and we try to create a mass that we can then manipulate and use in our design as part of the iteration of a mass. So if I want to do this, and if I have a tower here, for example, and the tower intersects with this portion, then the same follows. You see, this is my vanishing point, and this is my other vanishing point. And if I have a cap or a canopy here, then it will show this way. Now, if I want to delineate that mass and use this sketch as a design tool, then I start to carve out the mass in order to create different features for my building. For example, I have glass here. All of these lines would still follow the vanishing point, or all of these lines will follow these vanishing points. And this can be checked very like by eye. You don't have to go really technical. You don't have to use any ruler. Just try to train yourself to train your eye to do this, and then you'll be able to say this would be all glazed, and where does these mullions go? You go into this vanishing point, and then you start to divide these mullions. Or if they carve out of this lower building and you have something protruding, then you can also draw that. Of course, I naturally draw. Now, as you can see, this would fall within your eyesight. So it becomes a flat line, while things above you will have a slant this way, things below you would have slant that way. And this is still the horizon, which is your basic plane of reference. So if I want to color these things, some colors, just to show you what happens when you start to color the building and feel the masses popping out of the page. And of course you can add some shades and shadows and stuff like that that will make your building even more 3D. And we normally do that through different design tools or different rendering tools. And I'm sure most of you are well aware of how to use the computer. So this is a very primitive and raw version of a computer rendering that I normally use to, even if this is not correct as a shading, but I would still use it and show you how I can actually make this looks like a shadow. So something to that effect, and then I can draw some more figures through choosing probably a different ink pencil, and then I can draw figures closer to the building. Now you see what I did here. I started the head and placed it on the horizon. Farther figures would still be on the horizon starting with their heads. Because this line, the horizon, could be removed later in order to minimize the impact of this perspective. Or if you, for example, have a mountain behind the building, then you don't necessarily see this horizon. It becomes more of an imaginary line. And demonstration of how to draw a 3D perspective using simple, I'm going to use the red now. So here is my horizon. This is element number 1 that you need to know. Probably I would have put a figure here to help you out, remembering that is the sight line is here. So a figure would help you with that. Pretty much like when you see something on the SketchUp, you see the figure, but the figure's eyes is not always on the horizon because you have the ability to move up or down below the plane or above the plane. Also, another element is all the lines here. I'm sorry. Before that, we need to remember to draw these edges as verticals. Unless, of course, you have something like that as a mass, which is something else. But generally speaking, all of your lines are naturally vertical. So you draw that, and then you make some assumptions about the proportions, and then after you draw, you start to connect these lines and create your mass. Of course, this line is here already, and then you carve out here and you create whatever fenestrations you want in the building. So this is a very simple, straightforward way of drawing perspectives using very simple directions and really not quite complicated methodology of capturing your design and creating something that you can later show either on to your client or to your professor or to your instructor, and explain your ideas in a very simple 3D format, the format that actually we naturally see. So if this is, for example, a street, and this is a corner building, then you exactly want to design that corner as such, rather than looking straight and say this is north elevation, or whatever it is, and then this is west elevation, and this is south elevation, and so on and so forth. These west, north, south, and east elevations are crucial, don't get me wrong. But for schematic design, you want to start with this. And then you'd be able to say, okay, I'm going to translate that now into 2D drawing. So this is north, and then the thinner one would be west, and so on and so forth. I would start from this one first and then move to the more technical, where you can dimension all of these elevations and make it ready to fit into a specific site that you have with specific setbacks from the property line. I hope you enjoyed this lesson and you found it beneficial. And until I see you next time with another lesson, please leave your comments down below this video, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.